Before.
Before then?
Before the motion.
Before item 40.
Yes.
Okay, so just one correction there. That would happen before item 14, before item 14 is taken. So the adjournment would be after item 13. Thank you.
Item 7, presentation of petitions. Item 8, presentation of papers and reports from select committees.
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, I beg to move that the following papers be laid on the table. 1, report of the Director of Audit on the Resources Manager for the period May 2016 to 31st October 2019 for solar PV demonstration and scale-up project. 2, report of the Director of Audit on the financial statements of the Consolidated Assets Fund for the year ended 31st December 2018. 3, the annual report of the Grenada Development Bank, GDB, for the year ended 31st December 2019. And 4, annual report of the Grenada Tourism Authority for the year ended 31st December 2017.
Honorable members, these papers are so laid at the table.
Item 9, unopposed private business. Item 10, questions.
Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to address the questions that are on the order paper. But with your permission, Mr. Speaker, I would like to follow up on a few of the questions that were answered, but they were answered, the answers were given written. But at the same time, the answers were not given in time for me to question in the last Parliament. I got it after the question. So with your indulgence, Mr. Speaker, the question that was asked of the Minister of Foreign Affairs to provide to this House a list of all the diplomatic status given by the government of Grenada, the names and the place of birth. I would just want to find out from the honorable member if that list is a complete list. A list was indeed given, Mr. Speaker, but I do believe that there might be names missing. I just want some clarity.
Okay, I got the question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I intended to address the issue at some point this morning. There were some names that were, as I indicated to the member earlier, we're in a process of a review. Some people had expired, some people were off, some people were on. So there are some names that a supplemental list is supposed to be given to the clerk of the House. It should have been done 2 days ago. I'm not sure. I will have to double check that. But also, I want to let the member know that the question that was asked, is persons who are holding diplomatic positions. Not persons who have diplomatic passports. I'm sure he has one, his name will not be there. But the persons with diplomatic positions, there is a supplemental list coming because, as I told the House before, we were doing an extensive review when the question was asked, and there were some names that were on, some of that. So within the next week or so, you should have what the supplemental list would bring of diplomatic positions. Thank you.
Thank you. Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I also follow up on a question that was posed to the Minister of Works in terms of the development at Molinaire. And I have here the notice that was given for the home that was constructed. And it says here, development authorized hereby granted for the development of a parcel of land comprising 4,151 square feet situated in Molyneux, St. George, by carrying out the building operation, namely the erection of a 3-bedroom, 1-story building for the use of a single family resident in accordance with the application dated 16th August 2016. I just wanted to find out, Mr. Speaker, that in the construction of that home, it was not a single family home that was constructed. If you look well, you would see a 3-story building constructed, but yet on this paper, a single family home or a single story building was asked for permission. So I wanted to find out how or what permission was granted in terms of the building that was erected. That was not the permission given.
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do not have the document in front of me, as the Leader of the Opposition does, because he's indicated that it's a single family that the letter C was granted. Well, 1-story, 2-story, 3 stories. I don't know, it's a single family, and we can't determine whether it's a multiple family or so by the level of floors, in a building. But ideally, what was granted, I think was built, and if it's a physical development.
Leader of the government, Leader of the Opposition.
Yes, Mr.
Just take your light off. I thought you wanted an explanation.
Yes, but in his explanation, he's saying whether 1 or 2 stories, a single family, but it is also saying a 3-bedroom, 1-story building. 3-bedroom, 1-story building for the use of a single family resident. 3-bedroom, 1-story. So this is my contention here, that it's not a 2 or 3 story, a single story. Mr. Speaker, the member was making a point before I interrupted, so I do not know if he wishes to continue.
He did not indicate. He did not indicate that he wishes to continue.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would also ask that, as indicated by the clerk, the rest of the question on the other paper, I do believe that he mentioned to me just a while ago that he has received some email to the questions that was on the other paper. So I guess I will wait and get the directive from the clerk as towards the answer that was given for these questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, in relation to the questions posed by the Leader of the Opposition to the Minister of Health, myself, the responses were sent to the clerk earlier this week, and the clerk informed me this morning that he had some issues opening it. I've sent it back to him again in a different format, in multiple formats, with the assumption that he would be able to access it now.
Thank you, Honourable Minister for Health. Thank you.
There, Mr. Speaker, one question. Question 1 addressed to Minister, the Prime Minister. That question, the data is being compiled and being audited accordingly before it is given. So it's not yet ready.
Thank you.
Minister.
Item 11, urgent questions under the provisions of Standing Order number 21, notice of questions. Item 12, statements by ministers.
Honourable Minister for Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I take this opportunity to give an update since last we were at the House with respect to the events at the Ministry of Health, Social Security and International Business. Mr. Speaker, I can continue to be pleased and grateful to the Almighty to again announce that to date we have no new cases of COVID-19 in Grenada. Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, though that may be the only bit of good news with respect to COVID-19, the United States continues, our major close neighbor, partner, tourism, investor, etc., continues to have very high figures. Mr. Speaker, Canada, unfortunately, as of today, they went over that limit, which was 20 or below. It does not mean that as of today, we change the protocols for Canadians coming here. The way that the science observes it, WHO and PAHO, is that after a period, if consistently they have remained above 20 cases per 100,000 or rise significantly, then the adjustment is made. So we observe them over the next couple of days to a week and will make the appropriate adjustment. The hope is that this would not be the case. The issue there, as well as in the UK, Mr. Speaker, I'm sure you and members would be aware, the United Kingdom has passed additional regulations as well, specific to COVID and gatherings in an effort to control the spread. These are measures that are not entirely different to what we have been saying as a government, as a ministry, in terms of social gathering, in terms of protocols. These are severe measures compared to what we have now, because in the instance of the UK, regrettably, things have gotten a bit out of hand, and therefore we need to take significant measures. Mr. Speaker, I think the message there simply is that we continue to plead, preach, implore the public at large to adhere to the protocols. And it is a simple principle, Mr. Speaker, that there are certain behaviors that put the population at risk. The mass gatherings, the non-wearing of masks when in surroundings. And while, as a government, we should find a level of comfort in the fact that the population is saying, you've done a good job, we don't have COVID in Grenada, so therefore we don't have to do these things. No, Mr. Speaker, the fact is that if we were to do that and allow that, we would be saying that we place our lives entirely on those good men and women who are doing our border protection and quarantine control. And they are human, and while they are providing yeoman service, worthy of praise consistently in this House and elsewhere, we cannot have behavior that relies purely on that. Such would be reckless, Mr. Speaker. We have to adhere to certain rules, regulations, and principles that says that if something were to happen, that it would not be that bad, that we would be able to keep it under control, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, we have seen continued level of relaxation with respect to the seriousness of this disease, while at the same time elsewhere, our very neighbor in Trinidad, the disease continues to grow from strength to strength. We continue to say, let us not take for granted what we have achieved here in Grenada. Let us not take for granted the sacrifices that we have made here in Grenada. Let us not throw caution to the wind. Let us find that balance between preservation of life and preservation of lifestyle. It cannot be either or. Yes, there must be a balance, but we must be cautious. There are certain lifestyle habits that put our preservation of life at risk. And then there are certain implementations to protect life that would put our lifestyle at risk. And we find as best as possible a balance. The safest method for a government to take would be to keep the borders closed entirely and to have left our very citizens who are outside indefinitely. To continue a policy that would have created hardship, that would have led to continued higher and higher levels of unemployment here in Grenada. This is not practical. But the alternative is not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. The alternative is to find a balance and to find an understanding. And so we implore the members of the population to adhere to that balance, to allow as best as possible day-to-day activities that are necessary for lifestyle, part of which is social. Part of which is social. But it is possible to have social activities without being reckless. It is possible to socialize as a people and still remain safe as best as possible from or putting yourself at risk to the spread of COVID-19. And this is what we continue to plead and request and ask, and in the regulations to protect as best as possible. This disease continues to change. It continues to catch first world nations off guard. Many first world nations with systems much better funded, much better staffed and equipped than us have been caught off guard now twice in the first wave and are now experiencing, to an extent, their second wave. And some never got past the first wave, continues to grow from strength to strength there, the virus that is. So we are going to be passing in this House regulations dealing with quarantine specifically later today, Mr. Speaker. But that is not all that is needed. That is not the only thing that will keep us safe. What will keep us safe as a people, as a nation, is a united position on the adjustments in lifestyle to maintain as best as possible and as close as possible that which we hold near and dear, our freedoms and our genuine way of life, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, our relationship with SU continues to grow from strength to strength with respect to testing. We are now looking at automated extractors, what are called extractors, which would greatly increase the number of PCR tests that we are able to do daily, as well as a new form of extraction of samples that will be less invasive. But we work with them and with CARFA and with PAHO on that. Mr. Speaker, I also want to take this opportunity to touch on the issue of a vaccine. There is much talk in the public forum with respect to a vaccine for COVID. There is much concern, there is much anxiety. Grenada's policy, as to the policy, most, if not all of our OECS and CARICOM brothers and sisters, Ministry of Health and governments. We are not rushing into this. But we do believe that it is necessary, because of the importance of a vaccination, to be engaged in the conversations being had at the multilateral levels on a vaccination. So Grenada will participate with the WHO, Pan American Health Organization, on discussions of vaccinations that we are seeing from other nations being developed at present. That is not the same as rushing into. That is saying that we are going to participate in the discussion, the exchange of knowledge from the beginning which will allow us to make the educated and informed decisions as we go along. But we will not rush into this. And it is necessary that we recognize that there should not be a fear of vaccination of any type once the proper development procedures are followed. It is because of vaccinations that people no longer die of yellow fever, of polio, that we don't have measles, chicken pox. There are so many other diseases that would have been and were global outbreaks because of the timely and proper. So I understand and I can identify with some of the anxiety on discussions with vaccinations, but I want to assure the public that we are not rushing. And because we are having discussions now does not mean that we will be throwing caution to the wind with respect to any vaccination policy, not just a COVID-19 vaccination. Mr. Speaker, with respect to other businesses of the Ministry of Health, we continue to move forward with the opening of the phase 2. We continue to experience the challenges, like any other developing country, but continue to push forward and not use COVID-19 as an excuse, Mr. Speaker. But I want to take this opportunity to inform the public in this House, or the public through this House, Mr. Speaker, that COVID-19 is not the only disease out there that threatens our nations. It is the most significant one on our minds now. It is the newest, and it is one that, as a world, we were not prepared for, and we have been dealing with. But we have other diseases, vector-borne diseases, in particular, that plague our region. The ministry has begun its annual pilgrimage, so to speak, as has other OECS and CARICOM countries, dealing with vector control, fogging in certain areas as we see it show up, because it is not practical possible for any nation to do widespread national fogging, nor is it safe, but directed based on where we see large outcroppings of vector or vector-borne type disease also. But it is, like COVID, a battle that must be fought together. Like COVID, people have learned, it is not just a government that protects a nation, but the people together. So too with the vector-borne diseases. It is the collective actions of a nation that cause the gains or losses in those battles. And we have, as a people, dealing with mosquitoes breeding in our environment, cannot adopt a policy of it is the government's or the Ministry of Health's problem to deal with. It is a common responsibility of us all to make sure that there are not circumstances which are simple. Water, stagnant water around our domiciles, to work collectively on that. Ministry will continue to do its part, but year on year, every nation, including here in Grenada, the message is the same. We must all do our part to prevent the breeding of mosquitoes, in particular the Aedes aegypti mosquito, which only breeds around humans, around our houses. It doesn't breed in swamps and other areas of stagnant water. It breeds around human houses, gutterings, open containers, tires, wherever water pools, plant sources. That's where it breeds. It cannot exist without us. It cannot exist without us creating that environment for it. So it is not just the fogging. It is for us to recognize that we need to remove and work collectively on this. Because COVID-19 has been a strain on every nation in the world, including Grenada. And therefore, we need to do our part not to add additional burdens. I think one of the very few pluses, if any, of COVID-19 is that most, if not all, nations in the world and populations have become sensitive to the health and how diseases are spread and what to do to intervene and interrupt that. I ask that we contemplate the same when it comes to vector-borne diseases. That there's a personal intervention that can be made by each and every one of us to protect us individually. And the more of us that take those measures, the less the spread. We begin to be insulation for the others who do not follow. It is the same. So, Mr. Speaker, having said that, I again take this opportunity to thank all of our individuals, our public health officers, the same department that is responsible, and individuals that have been providing yeoman service, protecting our borders, making sure that the individuals who come in have received the required testing, are placed in the appropriate quarantine or observation locations, and remain there, and then receive their second test in a timely manner, and then and only then are released to allow to be among us, are the same individuals who are to deal with vector control as well, and are doing so as best as possible. But I say that to say the additional stress that is being placed, and we must recognize it. So, Mr. Speaker, I will not go my full length of time. We do have some other agendas to attend to, Mr. Speaker. But again, to thank those who are doing their part, to implore upon those who are not, and to continue to assume that we will, by the grace of God, get through this. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister for Health.
No, I have to go now.
All right. The Minister for Finance and Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I think it's known that important funeral of one of our ambassadors is taking place shortly, and some of us do have to leave and get back. So I'm supposed to be doing a tribute. That's the reason I have to speak now and leave. Hopefully I'll be back. Mr. Speaker, I stand to make some statements as it relates to issues concerning that affect the government and the image of the government as a whole. The first one relates, Mr. Speaker, to the issue of the pandemic, which the Minister of Health was speaking on a short while ago. Mr. Speaker, when the pandemic first came to our attention in March, the government acted swiftly in taking decisions to protect the country. It's known that we had the cabinet establish a COVID-19 subcommittee, which was chaired by the Minister of Health. Minister of Foreign Affairs was on that too, and several other persons, including persons, the CMO and other health officials, and other citizens who had serious roles to play in the protection of this country and advising the cabinet. It's well known that Grenada has been lauded for having, generally speaking, protected the border and protected the citizens of this country. So far, so good. So, Speaker, at the end of August, we announced that the COVID subcommittee's work has ended. We established a task force in several areas to look at aspects of how we proceed at a new stage going forward. And after that, Mr. Speaker, after these reports came in, we established some committees that would operate in advising the cabinet in several areas. And one in health is the one I want to speak to. And that is chaired by Dr. Braffett, who reports and recommends his recommendation to the Minister of Health, who recommends to the Cabinet. In other words, Mr. Speaker, that committee is the one who has to issue official decisions that the Cabinet has agreed on. And I think it must be made clear, because it seems like we're getting our fingers crossed, where certain peoples are indicating that permission was given by this person and this person for activities, and this must be made very clear. There's only one group of persons responsible for governing the country, the cabinet. I would assume that everyone knows this, but it seems like sometimes we get our fingers crossed. So it has to be clear, because the reason I'm saying this, Mr. Speaker, in recent times, some persons in our society have been initiating activities inconsistent with the regulations and, of course, permission from the government in the whole process of with the government's intention to protect the country, to protect all of us. It was well known the period of the two-day carnival was supposed to be, which was cancelled, that the protocols and the behavior pattern was inconsistent with this. The police, in good judgment, did not attempt to come down with a heavy hand. And I think they were complimented by all and sundry for this. It could have been different. In fact, I believe some people are hoping, that the police would have, in fact, behaved in a manner which gives the impression that a dictator was in charge of the country, because that was the narrative being pushed. So, the police did not. They acted wisely. And in certain sections of our societies, some of us have not been observing the protocol. It appears that we sometimes feel, and sometimes I'm not claiming it, Mr. Speaker, this was ill intention in many cases. Because you see ordinary people doing it. I go to places and I reach there, I see I'm the only person with a mask, and therefore I have to leave. Because I tell my friends I'm not staying, because you guys are not observing. And I can't be seen as saying one thing and doing another. You see that kind of image internationally. We don't want to be part of that. But in some cases, I believe there is a deliberate attempt to go against the fundamental decisions that is meant to protect the country. and some cases by people who ought to know better. That is what I'm talking about. Because it was brought to our attention that some businesses, hotel facilities in particular, not a lot, but some, have been holding serious parties. And when you see the pictures, you realize it must be deliberate. And it's by people who ought to know better. But there's a level of selfishness, permeating. As long as I am benefiting, to hell with everybody else. So if I'm responsible for causing infection of a country and causing a lot of poor people to die, I don't care because I'm making some money. We have to call it out for what it's worth. Mr. Speaker, I will not fail as long as I'm in that, have that responsibility, and I know the members of the government feel the same thing, the parliamentarians here, and assume the opposition leader feels the same way. We have to call it out for what it's worth. Because with certain people, you see activities of commercial boat rides with the jam-packed, with noises, as if it's a free-for-all business as usual. I want to make it very clear. The cabinet, the Prime Minister, and the committee who is responsible for giving permission gave no permission. Let's get it very clear. And I'm angry because it sends the perception that some people in this country can do as they want. And poor people must be allowed to be disciplined or to be spoken about if they do the same thing. This government is not a class government. It's a government for all the people of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique. We have seen this class thing in this country before. We have seen it. I grew up in it. I want no part of it. And I will not be heading a government that participates in sending a message that some people in our country could do as they want and some must be dealt in the opposite direction. I got a real problem with that, Mr. Speaker, and that's why I'm speaking here this morning on this matter in the way that I'm doing. I have therefore spoken to the Commissioner and his team. The law of the land must be adhered to. The Prime Minister has to obey the law of the land. The Governor General has to obey the law of the land. All ministers do this. The Speaker, President of the Senate, toot moon all of us. And therefore no one, Mr. Speaker, should be allowed to do as they wish because they're bigger than everybody else. Because some might feel that they have more privilege than others in this country. We passed through that stage. The old colonial period is gone. We're in a different period. And those of us that passed through some of the biasness in the society will not participate in sitting there and allowing that image and behavior pattern to proceed in our name. The message, therefore, would be, if we allow it, that we reach where we want to go, to hell with everybody else. Now we forget, some of us forget where we come from. I will never be able to forget where I come from. Let it be very clear. Mr. Speaker, the second issue I want to point out here this morning. So I just want to make the point. No permission was given. So the law was broken. Period. Let's get clear. So Jab can break the law, so all of us can break it too. That's the perception. Mr. Speaker, there is also something I need to talk about. I've seen happen over the years. It's well known. I've been in this politics for a lot of years. Every time this government initiates a serious activity to bring development and opportunities, there's some elements in this society that oppose it. There has not been one major initiative during the time that I've been Prime Minister of this country. And that's almost 20 years. That the government has initiated anything that some people has not come out and oppose and do everything to stop it. Activities that is meant to create jobs and opportunities for the development of the country, to bring people away from poverty, empower people and give them a chance to a better life, they oppose it. And it seems like the only time they will not do that is if when Keith Mitchell is no longer Prime Minister or the NNP is in office. I believe it's more Keith Mitchell than NNP, because I have a feeling if the NNP leadership changes, some of them won't behave like this. It's hatred of a man, and the man don't hate them. The man goes to sleep and he's snoring in good time while some of them can't sleep. You're going to sleep soon, though. It won't be too long again. They're going to sleep soon, but take it easy. Don't hurt your country for a man. It's like they want to roast a corn, so they burn down the church. That's what it is. You can burn down the church to roast a corn. I'm not mad on this one. I was mad at the first one. I feel sorry for them more than anything else. So when it was the building of the cruise ship terminal, man, certain environmentalists, pseudo-environmentalists, overnight became experts on the environment. The lagoon area there was like a dump. All animals, old animals, dead animals, old truck, old bus, everything dumped there. No environmentalist said a word. Fish was afraid of the Carriacou waters. No fish could be caught there. Those environmentalists was wrong. Not a word. Someone comes spending millions of dollars to clean up the place, to provide development and create jobs overnight, Mr. Speaker. And even the gentleman sitting in your chair was heading demonstration, Mr. Speaker. The speaker then, you know, Mr. Speaker, was involved in the demonstration. I'm giving history here, you know, if some people don't know. You can't believe, Mr. Speaker. So behave yourself. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, the point I'm making is people must think of country first. So opportunity. Now, so that was the lagoon place cleaned up, beautiful project. Some of them sometimes I go there for a bite. I see some of them sitting there enjoying the surroundings. I say, God is a good God. God is a good God, and enjoying the food, so to speak. Mr. Speaker, the cruise ship, Melville Street, the cruise ship, we are supposed to create such havoc in the country, the building of the cruise ship, because beach was going to be destroyed completely. Cruise ship comes, we had to fight that, Mr. Speaker. Cruise ship comes, Grand Dance is as beautiful as ever. And they don't even come and apologize afterwards. You know. They go on to the next time we initiate another project, they're back there again. So if the project is in St. George's, they find themselves there. If it's in St. Andrews, they find themselves there to oppose. It's in Carriacou. Some of them went to Carriacou and they had that important project in Carriacou. They were there. They bring experts from outside Grenada to say that it's the project, the mangrove will be destroyed. And same thing, they couldn't catch a fish in that place. Today, mangroves is better than ever before. More of it, and people catching fish just like in Lagoon now. But all these environmentalists overnight emerge. The ministerial complex, we are going to destroy the gardens, completely destroy it. We're not supposed to do that. The opposition now deliver a project. Chinese want to take over Grenada. Chinese want to take over Grenada. I mean, it's amazing, Chinese want to take over Grenada. Because if it was Americans that were coming and build those projects, you'd have Americans taking over, selling the country after Americans. Jobs are being created, development are being created. The farmers are benefiting from development. Look at that Silver Sands project. They oppose that too. All sorts of persons became politicians overnight at Silver Sands. Some of them living close to Silver Sands, the property. Watch that place being a dump. For years, someone comes spending millions of dollars creating one of the best property. They oppose it. Again, nothing you do, they support it. How many Grenadians have worked there? They oppose it. Mr. Speaker, some of them have no conscience. People without jobs getting opportunity. The farmers have been contracted. Deliver a project. Scores of farmers will be contracted to produce food for that property. We should be so happy. They're opposing it. All sorts of persons and people as so-called aspiring politicians that can't get 10 votes when they run. But they're demonstrating against the project. Demonstrating. All kind of failed politicians, failed leader, all kinds of stuff emerge up there to oppose the project Chinese taking over Grenada. Mr. Speaker, it's about time. It's about time we learn to grow up. This NNP, Mr. Speaker, party which I am part of, who has been in opposition twice, they could never say that this NNP oppose any serious project that the previous government then, in both cases, brought into the country. That was in the interest of the country. In some cases, I had problems with some of them, but I said, jobs and opportunities, I am not going to criticize it. I never forget the project, the Boost Shots project, Sandals. I was in opposition. When I saw the deal, they get everything. And I even told Bushwood, I went there, I said, Bushwood, really, you clean the barrel? Made a joke, but I refused to criticize it. Because there were only a few projects were brought into the country. Jobs are being created. We had no major hotel activities. So I complimented the government for taking that decision. And I stayed quiet on the side I talk about the deal, but I would never criticize it. I criticized the Grenlec sale for one reason. Not the sale, the condition of the sale. Where the authority that determines rates. And you could not even have a solar panel. You must go through the company. This is the only country in the world you have to go through a private operation to establish something to save electricity. It was the condition that was given. We criticize, Mr. Speaker, and I've always held that position consistently. I had no problem with the buyer. I had no problem with the individuals. It was the condition. So I make the point, Mr. Speaker, some of us must learn to support things based on what is right for the country, Mr. Speaker, and not just this personal thing. You don't like a man. You don't like a man. You don't like a man. You don't like the man, and the people like the man. So who's you? 3 times the man and the party winning every seat. I just make point to ask all of us to recognize this. We are in a period now. We've done well. We don't want to go back. We see what has happened in Trinidad. They were being rated as having done extremely well with COVID-19. What is happening now? The country has to be locked down. I hope and pray that we don't drop our guard. It's not about me, because I make it very clear I am not going to any function. Some people say they're not seeing me. Well, so be it. I am not going to go and expose myself and expose others because I want to play the best politician out. And I end up in some other place, Mr. Speaker. And I ask everyone to do the same thing, Mr. Speaker. On this note, I thank you for your patience this morning, and to say I try to be back and after the funeral that I'm not going to. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Prime Minister and Minister for Finance. Honorable Minister for Agriculture.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, we'll go for Minister for...
I didn't see my sister rise. I proceed. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think the member for St. Andrew Southwest, are you
giving way to?
Oh, go ahead. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I just rise to make some brief remarks on the issue of the matters raised by my colleague from St. George's Northeast, with respect to diplomatic appointments. I just rise because I think it's a duty of the government, it's a duty of us in foreign ministry to bring some clarity to debates. You know, I've always said that I love debates and I love when persons are asking questions. It leads, hopefully, at the end of the discussion, to clarity and increased knowledge. Because quite frankly, we all pursue knowledge, and I do hope that when questions are raised, particularly in the media and on social media, it is the pursuit of knowledge and not the pursuit of other things. With respect to diplomatic appointments, I just want to make some brief remarks on that. First of all, Mr. Speaker, and I raise it because it's out in the public domain, and I think it's the duty of the government to bring clarity or bring information on the issue. One, what appointments are made in the Ministry for Foreign Affairs through the Cabinet of Grenada? First of all, you accredit diplomats, and I'm referring now, Mr. Speaker, to Grenada's pursuit of diplomacy. Grenada's pursuit of relations with other countries, Grenada's pursuit of development through the process of diplomacy. We have accredited diplomats, and I'm bringing the clarity that I promised my friend from the Northeast earlier I would do, and we have non-accredited diplomats. Accredited diplomats are those persons who are accredited to a country. So, for example, we have in Cuba, Ambassador Clarence Charles. He's accredited to Cuba, and there's an agreement between Grenada and Cuba. So Cuban diplomats in Grenada receive immunity and certain privileges. Grenada's ambassador in Cuba, Honorable Charles, Excellency, receives certain privileges. Similarly with our ambassadors in London, Ambassador High Commissioner Alexander, ambassadors in New York, in Washington, they all are accredited. So they get immunities. And we reciprocate if that country has an ambassador in Grenada. So the British High Commissioner in the Caribbean would also get immunity. And then we have non-accredited diplomats. Those are persons who pursue our foreign policy along with us, assist us, but they are not accredited to a country. Therefore, they do not get immunity. So immunity is only granted to persons who are accredited, but because the countries have to agree. We call it an agreement. I guess it's French, the way agreements. It's an agreement between the two countries. Somebody cannot just land with a diplomatic passport and say, I have a diplomatic passport and I have immunity. I'm sure the member from Northeast has a diplomatic passport or had one. I'm not sure if he still continues to have it. In his position, I'm sure he does. He can travel with his diplomatic passport, but he does not get immunity. I can travel, but I do not get immunity because I'm not accredited to the country. And similarly, all of our PSs have diplomatic passports, some high officials. It is just a document to facilitate ease of travel. It does not bestow on the person any diplomatic immunities. Mr. Speaker, there are over 190 countries in the world that the United Nations recognize. Most developed countries have embassies and accredited individuals in many of these states. And in addition to that, they have what you call consular officials. So developed countries with huge amount of resources, they can establish an embassy in Grenada, an embassy in St. Vincent, an embassy in Dominica, an embassy in Pakistan, an embassy in India, embassies all over the place where they have accredited diplomats who have diplomatic immunities and other privileges that come with accreditation. But they have the resources to do it. We, small island developing states, Grenada, St. Vincent, Dominica, small island developing states all over the world, and small countries, are not so fortunate and therefore are limited with their resources. The question is, how do we pursue our diplomacy? And I'm making these comments, again, I say, simply because of the debate out there about, our diplomats. How do we, as a small island developing state, pursue diplomacy? We cannot afford to put an embassy in India. We can't pay for it. We can't afford. We have embassies in Cuba, and we have an agreement with the Cuban government that gives us assistance. We have embassies in China. We have agreements. We have an embassy at the United Nations, which is necessary, an embassy in Washington because of the deep relations between us and the United States. We have one in Brussels. So we have a few embassies. But relatively speaking, it is quite small, the amount that we have. So how do we pursue diplomacy in the world given these limitations? Mr. Speaker, it is through diplomacy that we get scholarships. Before our relations developed with Cuba, the pursuit of medicine was the domain of a few privileged persons. But it is since we developed a relation with Cuba that now ordinary persons have become doctors. You go through the hospitals throughout the region, you will see doctors who all have been trained in Cuba. Why? The pursuit of diplomatic relations with Cuba has led to that. Look at the farmers. Remember for St. Andrew Northwest, who is our Southwest, sorry, farmers, Minister of Agriculture, Morocco. It is through the pursuit of relations with Morocco that we get fertilizer from Morocco. So in every ministry that you go, education, health, housing, the Minister for Housing, it is through diplomacy that much of what we have, we've received. But how do we pursue this diplomacy if we don't have the resources. And herein lies the origin of the idea of the honorary consuls. The honorary consuls are persons we appoint to several places throughout the world. And it is endorsed by the United Nations. There's a group called UNITA at the United Nations. The honorary consuls are persons who are not accredited, who we do not pay, but who are, in a sense, pursuing our diplomacy based on their own resources. So in other words, let me give you some examples, Mr. Speaker, and I plan to be brief. Let's hope I am. We have honorary consuls in Dubai, although we have a consulate in Dubai. We have honorary consuls in Europe, in Africa, in Lebanon, in China, in Jamaica, in Belize, in France, Dominican Republic, India. Let me give you some examples of how it benefits us. We had a recent experience with an honorary consul in the Philippines. We cannot establish an embassy in the Philippines. So there's a Philippine individual who has influence and resources and is prepared to represent Grenada. Of course, they like the representation, they enjoy it, and they want to do it. Recently, a ship was stranded in that area during COVID. A Grenadian person on the ship ended up in Vanuatu and then had to go back to the Philippines and then was stranded. He was helped by our honorary consul in the Philippines. Similar in the Dominican Republic. We have fishermen stranded there. Who are they being helped with? By our honorary consul in the Dominican Republic. So the Philippines, the Dominican Republic. We have students who are stranded in China. Where do we get the help from them? Although we have an embassy, China is a huge place. So we have established honorary consuls, trade consuls, other diplomatic officials throughout China. And the reason for that, and you know, many Grenadians have received the benefit of this form of diplomacy. The parents of students, the families of these fishermen, all of them, Jamaica. It was an honorary consul in Jamaica who helped the students in Jamaica recently. The students are thankful to the honorary consul. Similarly in Philippines and other countries. So the development of this non-paying diplomacy through the United Nations has been of tremendous benefit to this country. Before any such appointment is made, Mr. Speaker, we do a thorough due diligence. We do a thorough due diligence to ensure that they have good character and to ensure that they have an impeccable record. If any issues arise with them in the future after they have appointed, they are immediately terminated. There are no contractual obligations on our part. If they do have a passport, it is immediately revoked. Well, these days, you don't have to get back a passport. You just terminate it by pressing a button, and they're no longer accredited. They're no longer working on behalf of Grenada. I served in 2 governments in the foreign ministry, and I assure you, Mr. Speaker, that this practice is not reserved for this government. It is all of the governments, because all of the governments face these limitations of resources. And I assure you, Mr. Speaker, that throughout the region, this practice exists. As a matter of fact, throughout the world. I have attended seminars and other discussions at the level of the UNITA, and I assure you that that is what has happened. But these persons do not have diplomatic immunity. I come back to the point I start with, because that is what is in the public domain. These persons do not have diplomatic immunity, even if they have a diplomatic passport, because a diplomatic passport in and of itself does not entitle you to diplomatic immunity. And I hope I'm making this point for the last time, Mr. Speaker. I've said it over and over, and I decided to use this forum to make that. Trade commissioners do not have diplomatic immunity. Ambassadors at large do not have diplomatic immunity. If we were to rely, Mr. Speaker, if our diplomacy was to rely on the resources of central government, I assure you that our diplomacy would not have led to all the benefits. Mr. Speaker, but there's another issue I want to address before I. This is the issue of Grenada-China relations. I was an advocate for the establishment of these relations for many years, even when I was not in government, and I was extremely happy when Grenada re-established relations with the People's Republic of China. China is the second largest economy in the world, and again, I make these comments because of what is, I think the word is trending over there in terms of Grenada-China's relations. In my view, the establishment of diplomatic relations between Grenada and the People's Republic of China was one of the most best strategic decisions taken with respect to our diplomacy in the recent history of this country, and I commend this government for making that decision. I commend the Prime Minister in that regard. Grenada, along with most developing countries, have been seeking new relations in the last 15 to 20 years. Why in excellent relations with our traditional partners, Canada, the United Kingdom, Great Britain? We maintain excellent relations with them. As I said earlier, we have embassies in all of them. We have a consulate in Canada, High Commission in London, embassies in Washington. But while we maintain those relations, we are seeking new partnerships, and there's a reason for that. Because even our traditional allies have been seeking these new relationships. Mr. Speaker, we grew up in a time when Richard Nixon took the decision, very historic decision, to open up China in the 70s. Remember Nixon and Kissinger opening up China. Richard Nixon was widely and continues to be widely praised for that. So today, Chinese investments in the US are in the billions, over 145 billion. In Canada, in 2019, it was $3.1 billion. In the United Kingdom, in 2018, it was $6.1 billion. And in 2019, it was $8.3 billion. I say that to say, not only are we seeking new partnerships, even our traditional allies are themselves seeking new partnerships. So while we maintain good relations with our traditional partners, we seek new relationships. And there's good reason for this. Our farmers can tell you, and I turn to the member for St. Andrews Southwest again, our farmers can tell you about the loss of preferential treatment with bananas. You see what happened to the economies, our agricultural sector throughout the Caribbean with the loss of preferential treatment from our traditional partners in Europe. So it is clear. Many of us grew up when the most coveted scholarship in Grenada was a CEDA scholarship. The Canadian International Development Agency scholarships and the British scholarships, they were coveted. You don't see them anymore. So what do we have now? Scholarships to China, scholarships to Cuba, scholarships to Serbia, scholarships to places that are non-traditional partners. And this is where our relationship with the People's Republic of China comes in. Because not only has it affected the farmers, etc., but there has been a serious reduction in overseas development aid by these traditional partners, Britain, the United States, etc. There is a serious pullback. And I think my friend in Ministry of Trade, representative from St. David, is very much aware of this because he's a trade man himself, that we have lost a lot with respect to overseas development assistance. So that is where China comes into the picture. Mr. Speaker, if you look at Chinese assistance over the last couple of years in health, education, housing, $67 million in the area of low-income housing, $45 million in sports and arts, $11 million in agricultural assistance, $2.5 million in policing and law enforcement, education, $13 million and $15 million. The relationship with the People's Republic of China has led to substantial benefits. But what I want to say mostly, Mr. Speaker, China itself has done an amazing job in dealing with its own poverty. Like Cuba, China is a developing country, and they have chosen to assist us. I am not suggesting that because of that, one must be just grateful, but I'm simply saying that it is the mutual benefit of our countries that we must seek. And while at the same time that we criticize, we must do so not. Can I have a couple of minutes, Mr. Speaker? The relationship between Grenada and the People's Republic of China has been done in the spirit of mutual respect, non-interference in each other's internal affairs, and the pursuit of development. I have no difficulty with criticisms. I know that there are people who are concerned about this or that. I know that there are people who would prefer that we go back to the province that we had a relationship with. And there is an argument there. St. Vincent does not have relations with the People's Republic of China. St. Kitts does not have relations with the People's Republic of China. But they have pursued economic relations with the People's Republic of China. In fact, at the OECS level, the OECS is setting up an office in the People's Republic of China. So while they continue not to recognize the province of Taiwan, they still pursue relations. You see, Mr. Speaker, I am simply suggesting that while we can have a discussion about where is the best country, let us not descend into xenophobia and narrow nationalism. Let us have a debate at a level that I expect our society to debate at. Is there a benefit in relations, in our relations to the People's Republic of China? I say a resounding yes. You may believe differently, but let us debate it at the level of what is the best developmental model for our country. China has not interfered in our internal affairs. I've been foreign minister for a while in this government and previous government. I know of no instance where there has been any attempt at interference in our internal affairs or any attempt to change our political model. It has all been done. We do not interfere in China. China does not interfere in us. We pursue development models based on mutual respect, non-interference in each other's internal affairs, and the interest of peoples of both countries. So that is the point I'm making. Let us, for once, think of country, rather than seeking a political advantage in the debate. There is enough xenophobia and narrow nationalism in the world today. It is increasing the dangers in the world for small island developing states. Let small island developing states not participate in that, but look at their interests, have a debate about those interests, and pursue those interests, not just pursue narrow nationalism. We see what's happening in huge countries to the north, where nationalism and xenophobia and anti-immigrant sentiment is running, raging all over the place. We, as a people, even if we do not support each other politically, must pursue our development interests rather than narrow political interests. So, Mr. Speaker, I will continue to raise these issues for as long as I can. Have done it. But I do believe that our people must recognize the interest that this country has to pursue, and pursue those, not necessarily the interests of those who will descend us into nationalism and xenophobia. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Minister for Foreign Affairs. Let me just say that I permitted the extension of the time because I knew a question was asked concerning the diplomats and so on, and I thought the explanation was of critical importance, so I extended your time for it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Much appreciated. And of course, I think in doing that, you did what I say. You pursued the national interest. Thank you.
Sit down, please. Honourable Minister for Agriculture.
Thank you, and good morning, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to give brief statements on some important developments within the agriculture sector. Mr. Speaker, firstly, I wish to express best wishes to Senator Dunson, the Honourable Dunson Campbell, the Representative for Agriculture and Fisheries in the Upper House, of Parliament. Mr. Campbell, Mr. Speaker, has announced his retirement from the Senate on medical grounds. Mr. Speaker, I must say that Dr. Campbell has played a stellar role in the development of the agriculture sector over the years, and his contributions must be acknowledged. Over the years, Dr. Campbell has brought his professional expertise to bear in prestigious regional and international institutions such as UWI and FAO. He has also brought his expertise to bear in the realm of development of farmers' organizations. He founded the Grenada Organic Agriculture Movement, GOAM, as a vehicle to promote natural agricultural production and develop the productive capacities of farmers. Soon after he was elected to the Senate, I recall, I sat with him, Mr. Speaker, to discuss programs and projects of the Ministry of Agriculture, to share and to have a discussion with him. He was very, very supportive and gave ideas, some of which we have incorporated in our programs. We also discussed organizing a solid farmers association and the benefits that can be derived from such an organization for the farmers. He was someone who attended all our meetings and all our training programs. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Dr. Campbell's contribution to national development is significant, and I want to publicly acknowledge this here this morning. I believe I speak for all members of this honorable House and for the agriculture fraternity in wishing Dr. Campbell a speedy recovery and all the best in the future. Mr. Speaker, like the other parts of our national economy, the agriculture sector has been given resources to cushion the impacts of COVID-19 crisis and place the sector in a better position to improve our food and nutrition security status. Permit me to share on three important interventions that the Ministry of Agriculture and by extension the Government of Grenada has initiated in recent weeks. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry launched its Farm Labour Program, Support Program, on the 27th of July, 2020. To date, we have provided labour support to 148 farmers, 6 government agriculture stations, including Limley Livestock Station and Dumfries Agriculture Station in Carriacou. I see the Minister smiling, the Minister of Carriacou. We have also supported the Cedars Home for Battered Women, the Father Maligan's Home, and the Cadrona Home for the Aged in the improvement of their gardens. Mr. Speaker, to date, 400 persons have received short-term employment under this program, and government has expended approximately $375,000. Yesterday, Mr. Speaker, the ministry launched its backyard garden program at the Cadrona Home. Under this program, we will assist 500 vulnerable households in establishing or improving their home gardens. We will also support select institutions to improve existing gardens or establish new gardens when none exist. Mr. Speaker, this initiative is being undertaken jointly with SIEP, the SIEP project. SIEP, through the International Fund for Agricultural Development, IFAD, has made available $100,000 to support our backyard gardening program. Mr. Speaker, the third initiative, which I will speak briefly on, is the Agriculture Feeder Roads Project. Mr. Speaker, only 5 weeks ago, the Ministry of Works signed off on an EC $46.8 million contract for the construction of 11 roads and 2 bridges, which create access to hundreds of acres of agricultural lands. Mr. Speaker, this initiative will create 250 jobs in the short term, but it will create countless more sustainable livelihoods over the long term. I wish to commend the Minister of Works for advancing this very important initiative. Mr. Speaker, before I close, permit me to offer congratulatory sentiments to the Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, who is celebrating its 75th anniversary. Mr. Speaker, over the years, FAO has been an excellent partner and continues supporting Grenada's agriculture and fisheries sector in very, very tangible ways. Just recently, Mr. Speaker, the Ministry endorsed a regional initiative to help the agriculture and fisheries sector in select islands respond to COVID-19 pandemic and support value chain development as a means of creating employment and protecting livelihoods. The Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean Economic Recovery Support Project, BECAS, is funded by USD $4.9 million grant from the government of Japan. The funds will be channeled through the FAO and the UNDP. Mr. Speaker, there are other initiatives which the FAO is supporting Grenada, such as increasing the contribution of aquaculture to resilience, food security, and well-being in the Caribbean project. It's a combined project. Strengthening agriculture data management in the OECS project, of which we are part, the Land Bank project, the Agriculture Risk Insurance project. Mr. Speaker, there are several other initiatives which the Ministry and FAO are currently discussing. It's on the table at this moment, and we intend to bring on stream shortly. So, Mr. Speaker, in closing, again, I want to wish them well. They have done well, they have worked well in Grenada, and not only in Grenada, internationally throughout the region, and they are celebrating 75 years in existence, and we want to put on record here and to give them congratulations for all the support they have given the Ministry and the Government of Grenada. In these few words, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister for Agriculture. Thank you. Honourable Minister for Youth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, this morning I am happy for the opportunity to discuss or to update on some of the initiatives, programs, and projects of the Ministry of Youth Development, Sports, Culture, and the Arts. Mr. Speaker, as a government, we continue to invest heavily in our youth development agenda. And it is important that our people must understand that it goes way beyond the Imani program, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wish to speak about, first of all, the Empower program. This program was designed and created to serve the needs of our young men at risk on the blocks. And currently in that program, Mr. Speaker, we have over 350 young men engaged. They have embraced the program wholeheartedly, and they are very happy for the opportunity to be given a second chance, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, for the past 2 months, the young men were engaged in a developmental session where they looked at things as team building, knowing oneself, time management, these key important characteristics of lives of life to help them make better decisions. At the end of that 2-month developmental session, they were involved in various activities. And I was able to attend the activity at Her Majesty's Prison. Yes, Mr. Speaker, our Empower program goes as far as Her Majesty's Prison. And I sat there and I listened to some of the inmates giving their testimonies, accepting their issues with the law, accepting where they had failed, and recommitting themselves to make better life decisions because of the opportunities from the Empower program. Mr. Speaker, I felt overwhelmed by listening to those inmates who indicated that they are now ready to make their contribution to national development. Mr. Speaker, from Monday, our Empower participants will begin the core aspect of the program, and that is creating opportunities for rewarding experiences. Following that, they will be engaged in the technical and vocational aspects where they will be involved in a lot of skills training aspect of it, the technical and vocational skills such as landscaping, small engine manufacturing, things like construction, tiling. These are the skills that we will have our young men engaged in so that they can make it for themselves, Mr. Speaker, giving them that empowering opportunity to make it in our country, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I also want to speak on the WeiVybz program. The WeiVybz provide entrepreneurial support for our young people. And added to our WeiVybz program, we do have a small business support center. So any young person who have a creative idea, who wants to get involved in business, can go to that WeiVybz support center to receive hands-on training. They will also be receiving access to financing for their small business. And for the year so far, Mr. Speaker, 22 young people have received financing through the WeiVybz program at a cost of $520,000, Mr. Speaker. And that is what we are doing, encouraging our young people to get involved in entrepreneurial activities. Yes, we have the public sector. Yes, we have the private sector. But they too can become part of the private sector by creating their own employment and employment for others. But what we are doing is giving them that opportunity and helping them along the way through the WeiVybz department of the ministry and also the WeiVybz support center. We continue to monitor the operations of those businesses to ensure that the participants and the beneficiaries can operate successful businesses, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I also want to speak here on Project Fly, a community intervention program that is currently taking place in Willie, St. George, and over Carriacou. They have already completed the life skills component of the program and are now preparing to get involved in the technical skills aspect. Again, they will be training in electrical installation, commercial food preparation, tiling, plumbing, and other important skills that we deem necessary are the demands of the job market, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we know at this time, as a result of the pandemic, we have a lot of our young people who are displaced or misplaced and lost job opportunities, Mr. Speaker. And we do empathize with our young people who are in those categories, Mr. Speaker. And as a result of that, and continuing our youth development agenda and recognizing the important role the Imani plays in transitioning our young people between school and employment, we are about to launch batch 7 of the new Imani program, Mr. Speaker, where we will see an intake of over 600 young people to be involved in life skills aspect and training opportunities at various levels, moving them from the low level to the high level, equipping them with the necessary skills, the right attitudes, so that they can make their contribution to our country's development as well, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, very soon you would see from the Ministry of Youth Development a garment production factory. And this will be to serve our students who normally benefit from the school uniform assistance. Because what this garment production factory will do is to produce school uniforms for our parents who normally depend on the government assistance. Our participants have already been trained in the CVQ level 2 aspect of sewing, and right now they are involved in training in the production of harmonized products and production at the commercial level, Mr. Speaker. And that is what we are doing. Some of they were participants of the Imani program. We are now moving them into a sewing cooperative to produce school uniforms for the beneficiaries of the school uniform voucher program, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, ongoing also, we have the National Youth Parliament, and they have been in training on an ongoing basis. Again, the Youth Parliament give our young people the opportunity to develop their leadership skills, the opportunity to develop their communication skills, to be able to do research, to understand parliamentary proceedings. And what we do, Mr. Speaker, we give them the opportunity to debate in the House of Parliament, where all the bills that have passed in the upper and lower houses of Parliament, they now can have their own debate, because we know that they will attract the youthful population to understand. So our youth parliamentarians are preparing for the second sitting of the National Youth Parliament, and they will be looking at debating the Gaming Act, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I just thought it was very important to update our people on some of the initiatives of the Ministry of Youth Development, and what we are doing here to ensure that our young people are engaged meaningfully. So when they have developed and harness all these skills, the right attitudes, they can make valuable and meaningful contribution to our country's development. Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Minister for Youth, Sports. Honorable Minister in the Prime Minister's Ministries for ICT.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker. Good morning to this Honorable House. I stand just to briefly share on the distribution of the school uniform vouchers. Mr. Speaker, this government has made great efforts to provide assistance in the form of school uniform supplies to needy families, to single mothers, despite the fact that this government has drastically reduced income. Mr. Speaker, due to COVID-19, the revenue that government collects is not as it used to be. Our Minister of Finance would have shared this on many occasions. But despite this, despite the serious challenges that we now face, the Prime Minister Ministry spent over $1.1 million for the school uniform voucher program this year. Mr. Speaker, this program aims to alleviate the burdens of families, especially now in the COVID-19 times. Nearly 5,000 applications were processed, and this was done online, Mr. Speaker, for the first time. Approximately 12,000 students throughout Grenada, Carriacou, and PT Martinique benefited from the school uniform voucher program this year, 2020. Mr. Speaker, many families are very grateful. Some said they did not expect any vouchers this year based on the financial state as a result of COVID-19. some persons express concern that government has to pay salaries to its workers. Government has to run the country, take care of its regular responsibilities. But here is government still reaching out to those who are in need. And so they express their appreciation to this government for its continued sacrifices in assisting the single mothers and the low-income families. Mr. Speaker, the following I would share with you, share with this House, a breakdown on the allocation for each child and household. Mr. Speaker, all preschool children would receive vouchers valued at $50. One page is $50. A primary school student will receive 2 sheets or 2 printed sheets valued at $100. A secondary school student will receive 3 sheets that's valued at $150. There's a maximum per household of $450, and many families received that amount of money, $450 thereabouts, based on the amount of children that are in those low-income family households. Mr. Speaker, I want to say that this program started very late this year, and of course it's due to COVID-19 again. And so our Ministry of ICT, the IT team at our Ministry of ICT designed a school uniform app. An app that was tested, it was launched, an app that was found to have significantly reduced the time that it took to complete the vouchers this year. And we're very happy, and I want to commend the members of that team that helped make that happen, and all the persons who worked, particularly Mr. Chitterman and, a few of them that really worked to make this happen. And so because of that app, Mr. Speaker, and of course, we started 2 months late, and because of the app, 95% of the vouchers were ready before school reopened. And Mr. Speaker, most families would have collected theirs over the weekend by Saturday morning, and were able to go shopping by Saturday afternoon. Mr. Speaker, our Ministry of ICT is exploring the possibility now of making this school uniform program totally digital by 2021. Because, Mr. Speaker, we've had to print thousands of very expensive sheets of voucher paper. It's a special paper that is used to print the vouchers. And it had to be done for 12,000 children, with a secondary child getting as much as I just mentioned, 3 voucher sheets. Mr. Speaker, plus there's the cost of ink. So it is very, very expensive. But that's not all. Printing also takes time. And Mr. Speaker, workers had to leave their regular duties in order to complete the vouchers. They left their regular jobs undone. So, Mr. Speaker, there's also the sorting of the vouchers and the stapling of the vouchers. Those things took days to be completed. And so, as a ministry heading forward to a digital economy, Mr. Speaker, we aim to have the payment for school uniform vouchers in the future in the form of a code that can be just sent to your cell phone, and you can go into the merchant shop and so use it to exchange or in exchange for school items. This is our plan for the future, Mr. Speaker. This plan will shorten the process, it will reduce costs, and it will most definitely propel our little island, our tri-island state of Grenada, Carriacou, and Martinique in its journey to becoming a digital nation. We will certainly keep this Honorable House updated. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable
Mr. Speaker,
Leader of the Opposition.
Just on a point of clarity, can the member for St. Patrick's East give this Honorable House the mode of distribution of the vouchers to the children? vis-a-vis St. George Northeast.
Honorable Parliamentary Representative.
Okay, I would just like to inform the Honorable House that it was distributed and collected by the seat officers and distributed. Thank you.
Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, I applaud the government in terms of getting these vouchers to our children. The vouchers came from government. And
Mr. Speaker, on a point of order, the ministerial statement is not a position for any debate or questions or so forth. I think the member will have the chance at the correct sitting to ask those to make statements or inquire anything else.
Thank you for that.
And this is what it is, Mr. Speaker. I was asking for clarity, but I did not get the clarity I was seeking.
Okay, that
is for St. George's Northeast.
Yeah, that is why you should wait till I call you, because I was about to say that was just a point of clarity that you were seeking. Okay? Thank you, Honorable. Honorable Minister for Education.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise this morning just to give an update on 3 matters as it relates to education. And of course, it would be remiss of me if I did not say a few words as it relates to the opening of school, which started last Monday. Mr. Speaker, I want to start on a note of thank you and to say a very special thank you to all of our stakeholders for working with us to make the reopening of school on the 7th of September a possibility and the success that it was. Mr. Speaker, tremendous credit must be given to all of those who have worked hard and work beyond their call of duty, putting structures and systems in place at all levels, the levels of the Ministry of Education, the levels of the school, and all of our other stakeholders, the Grenada Union of Teachers, the denominational board, for all the suggestions, advice, recommendations that was provided to the Ministry of Education. I must say, it was indeed a teamwork. While this is a challenge, we do not have it perfect. It would never be perfect. We continue to work together to put all the additional systems in place that we need to put as we go along. Tweaking is taking place. You know, principals are using different methods, different systems on the ground to suit their particular situation. And Mr. Speaker, I cannot help but again say a special thank you for everyone, our parents, the cooperation of parents, our students for their resilience. I looked at some of the students on Monday and I thought to myself, when we say Grenadians are resilient people, we are not just talking about adults, we are indeed talking about our children too. And I really want to applaud and recognize everyone, every single individual, every single sector for their tremendous support. But Mr. Speaker, I want to use this opportunity publicly to express my sincerest appreciation to the Minister of Finance and to every single cabinet colleague of mine for their support throughout this process, at times even creating inconveniences as it relates to financial support from various ministries to make this possible. And I want to say a special thank you to my colleagues. You have made a significant contribution to what we are experiencing now, and I wanted to register this, Mr. Speaker. So, Speaker, during the first week of school, we said that the focus would be on orientation and needs assessment, teaching our students this new norm, teaching our students how to operate in an environment of COVID-19. While we do not have any known cases on island, Mr. Speaker, we cannot lose sight of the fact that right in our back door, Trinidad and Tobago, they are grappling to deal with this situation. And so we have to be very cognizant of what is happening around us. I often say this, we do have loopholes in terms of entries on island, and so we ought not to take anything for granted, especially when we look at what is happening so very close to us. Mr. Speaker, in addition to that, we started personal development sessions for our teachers. We've said before, we have to retrain, we have to retool, we have to provide that support. And in addition to all of the training that was done before, whether it be use of devices, use of platforms, e-learning preparation, content preparation, and so on, Mr. Speaker, that's an ongoing work that we have to continue, and we are very committed to this. In addition to that, Mr. Speaker, in this first week of school, we also had the start of distribution of devices to students. So we are aware that the week before the opening of school, devices were distributed to our secondary school teachers, and that went quite smoothly, and we went straight into the distribution for the students of starting with Form 5s, and we are going down the line ensuring that we complete that phase where all of our secondary school students will have devices. While this is happening, Mr. Speaker, various teams are working simultaneously. So we have a team that is working day and night, continuing the process of configuration of all of those devices to be distributed in phase 1. Mr. Speaker, I always say this, and I continue to say, we are blessed to the extent that I don't believe we understand how blessed we are. While we are distributing devices to every secondary school student on island in this phase, Mr. Speaker, some of our neighbors are still trying to figure out how they are going to support the blended approach, online learning for their students. So one of our neighboring islands, speaking to the minister and PS there, they said they were only able so far to purchase about 6,000 devices. And they have more than 12,000 secondary school students. Mr. Speaker, in Trinidad and Tobago, just next to us, only last week we saw in the media about 65,000 students still without devices, as pronounced by the Minister for Education. And they were calling on the private sector. They were calling on citizens to donate devices. Mr. Speaker, we have a lot going for us, and we have to recognize how God has been extremely faithful to us in the process. Mr. Speaker, as we move forward, in this week coming, we are going to be doing major engagement of our parents, because our parents do have to understand some of the challenges that schools are facing. In this test first week, when students went back, we want to give feedback to our parents. We want to collect data from our parents. And in that period, we are also preparing for the what if. So what if we have a lockdown that is coming? We cannot just hope and pray that it doesn't happen. We have to put systems in place in the event that this happens, and we continue to pray that this would never be the case. But data collection becomes extremely important, and so I want to make an appeal to our parents to give their full support to our schools. Most of our students would be home in the coming week. Very few exceptions with special situations in some schools, but most of our students will remain home in the coming week while we engage our parents. Distribution of devices will also continue, and other support would continue in the coming week. I also should mention, Mr. Speaker, very important to us, the work that has been done in the area of psychosocial welfare and support for our students. And I want to commend all of the officers who are out in our schools, our counselors and so on, working with our students, supporting our teachers to ensure that we do not just take care of the academics, which we have said will be delayed until the last week in September, first week in October, because we want to make sure our students are mentally and otherwise prepared for what is ahead of them. Mr. Speaker, since our last session, we had the launch of a major initiative in the Ministry of Education, the STAR project, and I want to use the opportunity this morning to just speak very briefly on that. So, Speaker, for many years, we have seen a number of our students needing special support, coming into conflict with the law, having situations, Mr. Speaker, in school that we are not very proud of. And, Mr. Speaker, some of those students, on many occasions, have been brought before the magistrate court. In some cases, many cases, Mr. Speaker, these students have been sent to the Grand Bacolet Rehabilitation Center, and many of them have had to spend months at that facility for rehabilitation programs. Mr. Speaker, this is a situation that we are not happy about. It is a situation that has been happening for many years, and we are very grateful that we now have that facility that can support some of these students. But we are making an additional intervention as government because we believe that we should not and must not wait for a child to get before the magistrate court to go to rehabilitation program. And so we have started this intervention called STAR. And I must say, Mr. Speaker, currently we have a group of students in the pilot project that has started. And they are currently engaged in a 3-week camp, sleeping camp. And Mr. Speaker, I want to commend the team that is working with those students. There was an incident earlier in the week when one student had a slight seizure, had to be taken to hospital. And Mr. Speaker, what touched me about this is that when the doctor said to the student that he had to remain for observation, that child insisted that he wanted to go back on the camp. And even after his relatives would have left the hospital, that child attempted to run away, to go back on camp. And while I'm not happy that he did that, but Mr. Speaker, it was a sign that there's something on the camp that he felt good about, that he wanted to be there. And we want to provide that support. We want to continue to support our students in reform. But what is significant about this program, Mr. Speaker, is that we cannot just look at the child. And so I am extremely happy with the response and the support that we have received from the parents of these students. All students have been engaged voluntarily. Every person indicating their interest in participating after they were oriented in what the program is about. And so too, their parents willingly agreed for their child to participate in the program, but that they too will also be part of the program because we believe that our parents must be supported as well. Mr. Speaker, the program goes into communities. Because if we attempt to work with the child, with their parent, and we do not address some of the issues in the communities where they come from, then the program will not see the full benefit that it has the potential to achieve. And so, Mr. Speaker, I want to say that I will continue to update this House on the progress of this initiative, which seeks to address a number of areas: the academics, the spiritual, the psychosocial, the physical. All of those areas are captured within this program. So, Speaker, I'm not sure if I heard the bell, but I would like to ask for just one more minute just to say 2 brief words on the issue of rehabilitation of schools.
1 more minute.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Speaker, I want to just commend again the team of persons who have been out over the last few weeks, working extremely hard, in some cases leaving facilities 10 o'clock in the night, working towards ensuring that last Monday, the students, our teachers, principals could have returned to our various schools, at least in a condition conducive to start the school year. Mr. Speaker, it is impossible to have all of our schools ready at the state that we would love to have them at. And so that work is in progress, and I want to use the opportunity to recognize and commend the Minister for Works for his continued support. I've been calling on him over and over and over, extremely supportive, even at late nights. Mr. Speaker, his team has been doing an excellent job supporting the work of the Ministry of Education as it relates to ensuring that we create conducive environments for teaching and learning. Mr. Speaker, in that light, 75 schools. That initiative, Mr. Speaker, that project of school rehabilitation between 2020 and 2021, this government is spending over $50 million on schools and the development of schools. And so, Mr. Speaker, I just want to give the assurance that we are totally committed. We would not be able to solve every situation overnight, but the commitment is very clear that this government is prepared to work towards the development of the infrastructure in all of our schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister for Education. Are you the Leader of Government Business?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a request of you there, as you made in your opening statement, the request for the break at this time, just before motions.
Thank you. We just have a 13, that is personal explanation. Any personal explanations?
Yes.
The Honorable Parliamentary Representative for St. Patrick West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm happy that you have recognized my presence. Mr. Speaker, I want to commend the Clerk of Parliament for bringing to my attention.
Just one moment. We just want to change the item. So let's let we had not made the announcement yet that we have gone to personal explanations. So as soon as we do that, you'll get back on the floor.
The question is, was he going to speak on unopposed private business, or is he, because he cannot speak on ministerial statement?
No, that is why I said let him make.
Okay, so we can get back to the item.
Yeah. Proceed.
So the motion is on the floor.
Item 13, personal explanations.
Honorable Representative for St. Patrick West.
Once again, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as I was saying, I would like to thank the Clerk of Parliament for bringing to my attention the fact that as a Member of Parliament, you can speak under this agenda item, not only on the adjournment. So I really want to take the opportunity to make a give a personal explanation, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I really want to inform this House as to why I consider it necessary as a Member of Parliament to excuse myself from a panel discussion that was held virtually last Sunday. Mr. Speaker, I am not one who really follows social media, but I understand that there was extensive discussion, debate, positions taken along political lines as to what transpired on that day, and I have no problem with that. My problem, Mr. Speaker, is that that issue was not a political issue. It was more a national issue, and hence the reason why I'm raising it here. If it was political only, I wouldn't even bother with it. But it was a national issue, and I felt that the image of our country was being threatened, and I had to respond. And hence the reason why, Mr. Speaker, I am giving this explanation here today as to what exactly transpired, because you hear it most one side. I think it is opportune that I present what exactly issue was all about. Mr. Speaker, I was invited by one Mr. Kellen Bob, who hosts a Sunday program virtually, to be a participant on this program. And I was informed that the other members of the panel would be the parliamentary representative for St. Patrick East, Honorable Pamela Moses, and a gentleman by the name of Mr. Clouden, who understands works with the CBI program. That was information given to me. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, I felt it was opportune
that the occasion be taken, as Mr. Bob said, to discuss the Libera project, because that was the topic to be discussed, the Libera project. And I thought it was necessary that we do present our side as parliamentarians representing the area as to why we feel that project should be supported. However, Mr. Speaker, just before the program was scheduled to begin, I realized that the two names I called were not there at all. And instead, I saw 4 different persons on the program. And I thought it was unethical that I was invited to a program, given the names of the persons to be there, and when the program actually started, they were not there, and other persons were on the program. Persons who I did not recognize, I did not know. I could have taken a decision at that point to excuse myself and say I'm not participating because that was not the arrangement. But I felt, obliged to be part of the discussion. Another issue was that of the timing, because I discussed with the gentleman that time was critical for me. I could only allocate or give up half an hour to the program. And he agreed that, yes, for the first half hour of the program, a gentleman who studied in China would speak about COVID, and for the second half, we will be entertained in terms of the discussion on the Libera project. Unfortunately, the program went on for over 1 1/2. And as I indicated to him, I could not stay beyond a stipulated time, because I recall at that time, Mr. Speaker, 3 calls came in from Honorable Gregory Bowen to me. I don't know if you realize that. And every time the call came, so they had to keep cutting him off. And on the third occasion, I said, well, no, I cannot. Maybe it's very important. I can't cut him off again. But the most important aspect, the most contentious aspect, which I want to deal with, Mr. Speaker, was the statement made by one of the panelists, a gentleman by the name of, I can't recall his first name, but I think his surname is Douglas, who is supposed to be resident abroad, a Grenadian, as he said, resident abroad, involved in investment financing. And Mr. Speaker, from the tone of his presentation, I got the feeling that we were really not there to discuss this Libera project at all. And I was a bit taken aback. Although the discussion was proceeding smoothly, I was a bit taken aback when he referred to Grenada as a corrupt country. Mr. Speaker, that one I could not accept. I had no problem. I had no difficulty, Mr. Speaker, if the gentleman had referred to the NNP administration as being corrupt. We are accustomed to that. We have heard that many times. We have grown used to it. And as a matter of fact, the more they accuse NNP of being corrupt, the better we do at the polls. So if those who are making those statements are not learning the lesson, then that's too bad for them. So you could call NNP corrupt if you want. But to refer to your country as someone who says that he's a Grenadian but abroad, I thought it was a bit, as they say in cricket, beyond the boundary. And therefore, I had to excuse myself from that discussion, because no way, Mr. Speaker, I could be part of any panel discussion where someone is referring to the country as corrupt. I wouldn't be part of that. And therefore, I left. And I indicated to Mr. Bob that I'm leaving, because I could not, in due conscience, be part of a discussion of that nature. Mr. Speaker, we have to be very careful. When you label a country as being corrupt, and I will come to the definition and the role of Transparency International, when you label a country as corrupt, you can do serious damage to that country, Mr. Speaker, especially when that message is being broadcast out there worldwide.
For one, you are telling investors that is not a country to go and invest in. Two, once a country is labeled as corrupt, the transaction cost of doing business would be much higher than average, because investors will be looking at how can they recover in the event that they lose their money based on corruption. But even more, Mr. Speaker, our citizens of Grenada, become stigmatized. Because let us remember, Mr. Speaker, when we travel, we do not travel on an NDC passport because there is no such thing, or NNP passport. We travel on a Grenadian passport. And if you travel on a Grenadian passport and you call your country corrupt, it means that the same brush will dab the NNP supporters as well as the NDC supporters. We are all in the same bracket. So it is not an issue of politics. It's an issue, Mr. Speaker, of nationalism, how we see our countries, our country. And I consider it extremely unpatriotic and undignified for someone who is supposed to be a Grenadian to make such remark. Mr. Speaker, there was another member of the panel who actually recognized what was happening. His name is Mr. Brown Samuel. And he did not really want to get involved in that kind of deceit and misconception in terms of what that program was supposed to be. And therefore, he sent me a message in which he apologized for what happened. And in that message, Mr. Speaker, he made mention of the fact that his fellow panelists was too aggressive and contentious. I can't remember the word. Confrontational. That was his point. That his fellow panelists, that is Mr. Douglas, was a bit too aggressive and confrontational. But you will not hear that. Nobody will say that, right? Because that is what really started the whole thing. Mr. Speaker, I want to spend some time in discussing this whole issue of corruption. Transparency International, Mr. Speaker, which is the main international watchdog, the agency that monitors corrupt practices in various countries, describes corruption as the use of public power for private benefits. And they have constructed two major indices for measuring corruption. There's one, what they call the Absolute Corruption Index. And that index, Mr. Speaker, is evidence-based. That is to say, if you bring a charge of corruption, you must be able to provide the evidence. Yeah? So you cannot say a country or this individual is corrupt unless you can substantiate. And because it is so difficult to substantiate absolute corruption, they do not use that index. They use instead, Mr. Speaker, what you call the Corruption Perception Index. Perception. It's like saying, well, it's an allegation. And the Corruption Perception Index, Mr. Speaker, is just what it is. That's how people think. You have a group of experts representing various organizations, and will come together and make pronouncements on certain countries based on their observations of what they think is happening, or the reaction of people. Yeah? But it is not scientific. Yeah? But yet, it is used by Transparency International to give some idea as to how people perceive corruption in various countries. For example, countries like Norway, Sweden, they might rank very high, whereas they rank certain countries in Africa and Latin America very low on the perception. Again, it is a perception, not scientific, but yet they do use it, and organizations do use that index in determining or influencing investment flows to different countries. So it is still important. The question is, Mr. Speaker, where does Grenada stand in this whole issue? Because when you say Grenada is corrupt, you can either use the absolute index, which is not used at all, as I said, or you must use the perception index. And as far as the perception index reveals, Mr. Speaker, the latest index, 2019-2020, Grenada had a ranking of Grenada ranked 51 out of 180 countries in 2019-2020. Third in the region. Third, the highest ranking is, well, from number 1 going down, right? So only 3 countries were ahead of Grenada in this ranking. In 2012, under the then NDC government, Grenada had the same ranking, 51, but it was 4th. In essence, Mr. Speaker, if you use the ranking and the position, the score, it tells you that Grenada might even be slightly better off now on the index than it was in 2012. So how can someone conclude that Grenada is more corrupt now when the evidence does not support it, based on the perception ranking? And therefore, Mr. Speaker, one has to be very careful how we use the word corruption, because as it stands right now, as I said, Mr. Speaker, it cannot be said that Grenada is more corrupt than it was 80 years ago. But what is telling, Mr. Speaker? Even if a country might be corrupt, you do not go out there. Even though there's some perception, as a Grenadian, we cannot do that, Mr. Speaker, because we are tarnishing the image. Jamaica has a lower ranking than Grenada. Trinidad has a lower ranking. Right? We rank better than them. But you will not hear Trinidadian telling everybody Trinidad is corrupt, or Jamaican telling everybody that Jamaica is corrupt. No country whatsoever. We do not do that, Mr. Speaker, as patriots. And I have no apology disassociating myself with anyone, any group that seeks to destroy the good image of our country, Mr. Speaker. And that is the essence of the whole thing. So you can take your position, you can criticize me if you want. You can say, yes, I was upset. Yes, I was upset. And there's no difficulty in me saying that I was upset. You could also say, well, as some say, well, I was disrespectful for walking out. You can say that as well. Because as I said, Mr. Speaker, I will not associate with such behavior. And if you want to speak of disrespect, I want to know what could be more disrespectful than when someone who was a leader of the opposition would walk out of Parliament. Walking out from a panel discussion, you consider that to be as disrespectful as a leader walking out of Parliament? So we have to be very careful, Mr. Speaker, when we make those kind of comparisons. And on this note, I just want to say, Mr. Speaker, that as Grenadians, we have to demonstrate a higher level of national pride. This is our country. And some of us would go to the extreme to destroy this country just to get at one person. When you destroy the image of Grenada, you're not destroying Kitpichel or NNPL. You might be destroying your own future because it's the country that is ranked, not the political organization, not the party in power at the time. And we have to be careful about that. Do not go to the extreme of destroying your country just because you want to get at one man. It does not work that way. And again, Mr. Speaker, I'm urging my fellow Grenadians, whether you are in Grenada or whether you are in the diaspora, you ought to be ambassadors of your country. If you say you are a patriot, you have to act in that manner. And no patriot, no one who claims to have that national pride will describe this country in that context of being a corrupt country. As I said, if you want to say NNP corrupt, so be it. I will take no objection to that. Because we have heard that before. And maybe it is good you say it, because as I said, history will show that the more you target and accuse NNP of corruption, the better we do at the polls, because the people understand that what you're saying is not correct. They understand that NNP is a government that provides for people. And all this talk about corruption that cannot be proven, they understand that as well. Because don't forget, Mr. Speaker, in 2008, NNP, the NDC campaign on the platform that they will bring corruption charges against the leadership of the NNP. They had 5 years and 3 months, and not one iota of evidence was provided. So you know what the people said? Don't come back to us with that kind of old talk. They did it in 2013. They saw the results. They came back with the same thing in 2018. They saw the result. Let them continue on the same path, and the result in 2023 or whenever will not be dissimilar to 2013 and 2018. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Representative for St. Patrick West. Thank you for that explanation. Yes, yes, Speaker. We move on.
Share personal explanation for you.
Honourable Representative for St. Patrick East.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. I stand here today in support of my colleague from St. Patrick West in defending our country for our major projects. And just to share that at no point in time did I receive any invitation to that talk show that he attended. I also stand, Mr. Speaker, to share, just to share that many things that are on social media, we must be careful as a people what we're listening to and what we are believing. Because last Thursday, my colleague, the representative for St. Patrick West, and I, and a few environmentalists, we visited the Liverer site, and we went there not to visit the construction site. We did not request that. We just sought permission to enter, just to enter the area, walk through the entrance and to use the road. And just to, walk at the back of the construction site if we so desired. And only that was requested, Mr. Speaker. But it's all over the country, and it's discussed on, radio programs, TV programs, social media, that my colleague and I were locked out by the developers at that area, and that we were not allowed to enter the construction site. Nothing was further from the truth, Mr. Speaker. We had no intention of visiting the construction site, and as such, the workers at the construction site, including the administrative officer, had no need to be informed of our visit because we were just visiting. We were just walking the road far from the construction site. So only the security guards at that development was informed that we were coming. And so, Mr. Speaker, I just want to make it very clear that our government, we have a great working relationship with the developers. We are welcome there. We were asked if we didn't want to enter. And, we told them, no, this was not the purpose of our visit. The purpose of our visit was just to observe the Ramsar site, to look at sketches of the development to come in relation to the lake and the environment. And just to let the environmentalists know, well, look, the lake is over here, the building structure will be on this side, here is your lake, the golf course will be on another end. Basically that, and to take some drone pictures, which we did. So that was the purpose of the visit, not to visit the construction site. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Honourable Representative for St. Patrick East. At this time, we would move to take an adjournment and return. How many minutes we should go to? 30, 40 minutes? 40 minutes? So we should be back here at 12:05. Honorable members, at this time we'll take an adjournment and resume at 12:05.